see, we had some pretty high vacancy rates 10 years ago in the Bay Area, but we also have some of the tightest vacancy rates in the Bay Area. And what's also interesting about the Bay Area and actually the industrial market, you got to remember it's many different product types. The same difference between calling a 7-Eleven a retail versus, you know, a Tiffany's a retail outlet. That's how different retail sites can be as well. So, but what really the takeaway is here is that our vacancy rates have been far below the average. And even though we have had an uptick, the uptick is not going into anything other than more than to normal vacancy rates. And the long-term forecast is that we're going to see a flattening back down again on that. Now, with this, here's the other good chart, and this is really where you see the difference between the Bay Area and the rest of California. Both of us have rising rents, but now look at the scales on California, on up there in the Bay Area, we're breaking the dollar a foot range. And I can tell you out in my side, in my area, in the smaller units, they're up to $1.50 plus. I have just signed a 1,200 square foot industrial lease at $1.80, and that would contrast to $1.35 for the same office space next door to that. Do we have any questions at this time? Anybody want to pump in and say anything or jump in? Helen, I don't know if we have
I want to remind everybody, if you have questions, be sure to type it in the Q&A box or raise your hand. I'll be monitoring on the back end, and we'll answer your I have Eric answer your questions as you ask them.
Okay, so let's look now, and we're looking about again, what have we got over the past 10 years of inventory and so forth, available square feet. And I think, again, this is one of the reasons why industrial is such a darling right now, is that if you do look at the vacancy rates, you know, let's look at that right-hand chart over the past 10 years. At the worst, we were in the 8% range of vacancy rates. Now, if you contrast that to anything else, you know, office space, they're lucky if they ever get to the 8% vacancy rate on that. So again, when we're looking at this here, and you can see that pretty much we have high demand, or I should say we have limited supply for, you know, and it's historically been that way for 10 years. And, you know, what's interesting is to see if we are building new buildings, how filled up are they when we get them? Now, you got to remember, sometimes this lumps in those big logistics warehouses and also the smaller projects. So it's kind of, again, it's an average for whatever that's worth. But you can see for the most part, when these buildings are hitting the market, they're pretty much halfway leased up already on that. And that's a good thing, is when you got in there, is when that building's built, you're not even having to wait for a lease up. I can tell you anecdotally on a project I have in North Concord, we're closing on in the next week, the land deal I've been working on for a couple of years. We have our 3 tenants already in tow and signed up. So what'll be interesting for that is our delivery of approximately 200,000 square feet of industrial space will increase the total amount of inventory in the market. But because it's actually leased up at the time we deliver it, it actually causes the overall vacancy rates to decrease a little bit. I think everybody can understand it. It's just an interesting effect of what we got going on in industrial. Now, here's what we talked about, again, construction on that. How is that for absorption rates in California? Pretty much everything that they've put on the market in the last 8 years has been sucked up off the market. We had a short time when it wasn't, and we go back before then, and then we were creating inventory. Now, I think it's really more interesting if you look at the forecast. The forecast for industrial is that as much as you make it, we can take it. And you look at the same way with the Bay Area. The Bay Area thinks maybe next year, in the middle of next year, we have some deliveries that might hit a little bit, but that is positive absorption quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter. You don't normally get that on that. Now, I would tell you this right here. Why is it that pretty much everything can be built, can be bought, is going to be filled up and absorbed? Why aren't we building more of it? That's another lecture on construction costs. That's another lecture on construction costs. So I think one of the things we also need to talk to now is about, we're talking about deal activity. COVID has been a pretty big hit for all of us in terms of how busy we are. And the same thing is what I've seen as well as the industrial. Even though we're busy, personally, I've seen about a 50% decrease in deal activity. The lenders are very scared, so my sales are going slower. If you look at this right here, you can see leasing activity is taking a dramatic drop there at the first part of 2020. But also, I think anecdotally, we have a lot of people that are ready to start leasing again. I think what we'll see is a big swing back, bounce back in those areas once everybody, the vaccine is released. Because in my humble opinion, that's what we're all sitting around for. We're sitting around for a vaccine. Once the vaccine's out and how quickly it can be distributed will be the key to how quickly these numbers in terms of leasings come back on that. Now, we circle back to inventories as well. You know, we're talking about vacancy rates. We're talking about absorption. That leads into construction costs, or excuse me, construction starts. And what's interesting, you can see we have a lot of building going in California, and we have a decent amount of building going in the Bay Area. But you always have to contrast that as well with that absorption. So really what happens is when you look at it, no matter what we've been building, it's been absorbed and occupied. That has not created any increase in vacancy. So all this new product we're going on does not really help us because our demand is high enough that it's sucking up all of it. And that's where we jump back down to the absorption charts like this right here. Anything we've been putting out in California has been leased up. They're taking it. So then now let's talk about buying activity and what we're doing. You know, what's the sales volume? So sales volume, as you can see from the charts, dramatically increasing. Bay Area, some big peaks. Those, you know, a lot of those big spikes you see are from huge portfolios transacting at the time. However, it's easy enough to see 2020 has taken a big hit in California. And, you know, I think that's just directly related to one is to the lending. When you have legislation that comes out that may allow tenants not to pay, lenders tend to wait and see if that's true or not, because they know the note doesn't really ask you whether or not you have to pay rent or not. They're expecting you to pay rent. So again, I think the lending side of it, it's the slowdown there is definitely tied to the legislative ordinances that we see that, you know, give tenants the opportunity not to pay, which, you know, the trickle down effect on that. So let's talk about cap rates. We've got these great products that are fully leased up. Construction costs are high. They're taking all of it. That's exactly what you would see here is you'd see cap rates dropping, because the reason why a cap rate is going to drop is one is that you're going to predict that you have future rent growth. And if you have high future rent growth, you can sell it for a pretty cheap cap rate because your IRR will pull you back for a good CCIM. You know that IRR is what counts. So at the rent growth, that will pull you back up. So what's interesting to note here is though, even though for most we see, you know, a decline in values, the forecasts say, yeah, by the end of next year, that's going to be gone and we're going to have those same expectations again. And again, those lower cap rates, that's the reason why you take a 4.5 cap rate is because you've got the high percentage chance for increased revenue, which will quickly get that out of the 4 range and up to the 7s, the 8s, and then double digits. But that's the way that when you look at the cap rates here, even though they seem low, you got to remember you're in a high demand market that has the rents increasing on that. And again, here we go. Here's the cap rate, you know, what we see in different product types on it. They all pretty much mirror each other on that. You know, again, cap rates on industrial, they have been going down where it used to be a good 200 basis points higher. The reason why they're lower is because the rent growth is expected to be higher. And we are seeing that too. Now, if you're lucky enough and you know some of these people, that's because you're making some big deals. You look at who's been buying in California, in the Bay Area, those are all logistics. Now, they tend to get up there because the size of the spaces are really big, but industrial, so much of it is dominated right now by logistical warehouses, where they're located, how big they are, that supply chain. And that is the number one thing, as you can see right there, between the buyers and the sellers. Now, the sellers, again, the same thing. You see logistics selling. And there's a little bit of difference between the Bay Area, but you can see our three big sellers are the same ones for California. And those really are following with portfolios on that to follow around what we got on that. Now, I'm going to circle back to my Zoom meeting if I do it right. Okay, are we back to me now?
Yep, back to you.
All right. So I also have been asked about questions about cannabis, because we have a lot going on in that market. And what I would say is, please remember the cannabis, what that really is that's a segment of the industrial product market. So you may have some areas that towns that are active in it. I'm lucky enough right now to have my little town of Concord being very active with issuing licenses and so forth. So we're seeing great activity at some high prices on that. But if the city doesn't have the cannabis zoning, or it's limited the license, there's very limited activity on it. I would also tell people that in this industry, it's starting to get past the startup stages of it. And now it's in it where we're seeing more business people better managed, not just winging it types that come in there. So that is on the cannabis. I would say what we're seeing, it's all a matter of the zoning, is places that have zoning, and also the number of licenses that those cities are putting out, because those two will tell you whether or not you have demand or not. What I would also tell you is that if you do get in that industry, that the process is much slower for approvals, even if you get help from the city. It's a tough process. There's always little things that happen. And so there's a lot coming back and forth on it. What I also want to talk to is just a little bit about construction costs. And when we talk about industrial, you know, it's a huge product line that can go everything from little tiny, you know, 1,200 square foot spaces to literally 1 million square foot space that's 34 foot high, that all those little spaces could easily fit inside. So there is a huge difference between the demands for different type of products. You see little tiny guys, they are the little tiny spaces. They're impossible to replace at cost and rents. So the demand on those are high, the vacancy rates are low, and the rent increases are going up dramatically. They are seeing 50% rent increases over the past 3 years. On logistics sites, it very much depends where you're located. Logistic warehouses in the right place lease up quickly. Ones farther out on the cul-de-sac or not in the proper place, they're sitting and they're trying to fill a big hole out there. So we really see, you know, little niches that you have to apply to. I see little niches with small tenants. I see niches with logistics. I see niches with specialty uses like cannabis. You also have medical as well that have uses on that may be, specific. Helen, we have any questions yet now from the studio audience?
And Eric, it's Shane. Yes, we do. Kyle has a question. Do you see more sale leaseback deals amidst COVID?
So sale leaseback, I have some clients that are interested in doing that. In COVID, I just inked a sale that we did a 8-month lease with the fully executed option of purchase, because this guy wanted to get past the COVID to how we were doing that. I'm working on a deal right now where we're trying to restructure the lease on a sale, meaning that we're actually coming in and offering the tenant a lump sum cash payment if they'll let us raise the rents now to kind of market the space better. And that's just a CCIM exercise. Hey, if you got $500,000 now, how much is that worth to you versus, raising your rents now on that? So I have a lot of people asking about those, but I don't necessarily see that. I definitely do have people out there wanting to buy just because interest rates are low and people are thinking there may be a bargain out there. But again, different ways to structure stuff, yeah, but not so much. I haven't got anyone personally, but I know a lot of people that are, quote, looking for those type of deals right now too.
Great, thanks, Eric. And now we have a question from Cameron. Are you seeing demand for new cold storage facilities? And what are your projected construction costs for the Concord project you were building?
The cold storage facilities, a while back, I did some work in that arena and tried to help on it. And those buildings can be specialty buildings. And when you get into construction costs right now, no matter what you think it is, you're way off, you're way low. So what I see is anything that has high TI costs to specialize a building, you get in an area where you're going to get high demand for it. I do have people, I haven't been chasing any of those right now, but I do know, again, it's, hey, that building, if you have something that is designed to handle that, and the construction costs just make it that, hey, there's not going to be any more new supply, you're going to be well set. I think the same thing applies to like little small tenant buildings. It is too expensive to divide up those little smaller buildings. They just, they're going to have high demand. Now, regarding your construction costs question, when we ran this out there, this was concrete tilt up for like 20-foot clear. He had it, and we were at about $289 a foot. And that was assuming, fully entitled land at probably at $15 a foot. But I would say this as well, at that 289, the soft costs were lower than, he had a 12% soft cost, which I think you got to double that the soft costs have gone through the roof. So really it's in the 300-foot range. When that project we were working on originally, we were going to do a little small multi-tenant, guys. And the next year I was going to be set because I had like 100 units I was going to be leasing. And during the course of the sale, we ended up with 3 just very large buildings because we would have got rents that were more than 50% higher than the highest rent right now, and then get that on a triple net basis. So it just didn't justify it. And that's why you may hear me say time and time again, hey, those small light industrial multi-tenant buildings, there's no way you can build them down to rent them out. It just doesn't make sense at all. When you got construction costs over 300 foot and, the cost of the other stuff is just so high to build it, you don't have any new supply. And that's one of the reasons why we're building all these logistics centers. It's just a big, huge empty box with basically 4 walls and a roof on it. Those are very cheap to build. When you get down to those small buildings, the local sewer guy wants a sewer connection fee for everybody's restroom. Well, that same 10,000 foot building, you'll have 10 times the sewer connection fees versus the single tenant. And that's what threw us off on it. And again, that's why I think if you're going to be buying something, buy those little small multi-tenant. You know, you just can't pay it. Get concrete tilted, costs too much. I think that may have answered it, but yeah, very expensive, and the soft costs are something that's out of control. It's 30% of the cost now.
Yeah, that's unreal. Thanks, Eric. Again, Cameron has one other follow-up question. Are there any credit unions finally lending on cannabis deals?
You know, that's a great question. I have have an ownership interest in a warehouse in Benicia where we are leased to cannabis tenants, and we're getting good cash flow now. We pay cash for it because, you know, part of it, you can't have an FDIC insured loan on it. Well, when we now that we're cash flowing, we're like, hey, maybe we want to get a loan on it. So to answer your question, Cameron, it's not yet. My understanding is that Congress had a Safe Banking Act that the Congress passed federally, but it got over the Senate. They're not going to do anything until after the election. That was what would allow the banking, which would open up the lending, which would make everything work well. I'm actually, someone just emailed me over the weekend 3 sources for potential cannabis lending. So I'm kind of sorting through those myself. Give me an email, Cameron, and we'll, if I find out somebody, but it's, for the most part right now, it's guys wanting to do hard money that you're at double digits. That doesn't make sense because most of these companies now, we're stabilized. You know, we're not in a startup. We're like, hey, we want something that I know is this and that. So I need to have an interest rate that works for me. It doesn't, you know, how am I going to get a return if I'm doing, you know, 12% note on it? So it is evolving. I'm seeing more and more people seeing interest in it and wanting to lend on it. But I have not seen anything that is anywhere near what you would see in a conventional type of note.
And I'd just like to direct, if you don't have the Q&A up for our audience, Kyle Chang says a few conventional lenders are financing cannabis deals at low leverage. And he said, feel free to chat Kyle at chessboardcapital.com. So that could be a resource for anybody looking for lenders on cannabis. And please, if you have any other questions, Eric, I do have a question for you. Obviously, a huge bulk of the demand in industrial right now is for logistics warehousing. And of course, you have some of the major like Amazon type players. Are you saying that this is the new trend? Like this is where the world is going? So a lot of conventional just retail brick and mortar type is getting more into the logistics game?
Well, you know, there's a ton of demand for that. The last mile. I think the key is where you're located. So out in Napa, they tried a project a couple of years ago. And now if you go out and check out there, yeah, you can get your 1 million square feet. The building's for sale or for lease. Now, whenever you have a building that's for sale or for lease, that tells me it's a brand new building. Somebody, you know, didn't really figure out the demand right. They're trying to get rid of it. So if you're way out in Napa, maybe that's not the place you want to be for your big logistics warehouse. That's probably the place for the wine warehouse. So, you know, a lot of that depends on, you know, hey, where you're going on it and where you're located, you know, within that. I think also, you know, a lot of the internet, we because of what's happened, the internet has had a huge boost because, hey, everything's remote and that's what the internet's about. The long-term demand, to me, I worry about too many big, huge 1 million+ square foot warehouses, because the only thing you could do in that is pretty much stock a bunch of stuff. If you lose out, you could be really, you know, you got a specialty purpose building, that's something hard to do with. So I tend to, you know, the more specialty purpose you have, the better you better know that market. And again, that's kind of why I lead back to, hey, that best product is that little tiny light industrial multi-tenant. You got, you know, there's a gazillion guys a day wanting to lease that stuff. So if you do go out in that logistics stuff, you better be in the right location, because if you're outside the direct, you know, and not on a good truck route, you know, it's not going to work well for you. You're going to end up, and when the economy does contract, you're going to be the one that's going to be holding the bag, because the tertiary markets are the first ones that get hammered usually, and the last ones to recover. And you see the same if you go out farther out to Fairfield or Vacaville. They got some big buildings out there that they could put you in right away. Not so much around the Port of Oakland on that. So it definitely depends on where you're at. But I tell you, hey, be careful when you're going on something very, you know, specialized, because, you know, you live or die by that on that.
Great, thank you, Eric. And again, to our audience, please ask questions. Eric is one of our foremost experts in the industrial marketplace in the greater Bay Area. So if you have any questions, and Eric, another question, what do you foresee as one of the top threats to the industrial market? What are you kind of keeping your eyes on, you know, over the next 6 months to a year?
Well, it's the same thing I would tell people for the past 3 years whenever you heard a forecast. The only thing that can screw us up is the government. That's the only thing you got to worry about is the government. So we should be safe. Yeah, I think our industrial markets are poised for a lot of success. I think a lot of people for a while were down on manufacturing for some reason. They think, hey, you know, we just call up and it magically shows up. You know, we just need to order warehouse. But I think some people are understanding that, hey, you know, this is you know, the industry is good for us. I just, you know, my worries are construction costs and soft costs, because on this project I was working on, literally, when you get about a third of the cost being the soft cost of your project, that's a big thing for you know, you have to get a lot of rent just to cover the piece of paper to build. So cities, when I walk back in there and we say, hey, these companies are coming from out of the area. They're bringing hundreds of jobs. What can you do to help us? Cities were nothing. What about reducing the fees? No can do. So that's one of the reasons why we had to kind of change what our plan was, because we ended up going away from the smaller light industrial units, because even though there was high demand and we probably had more employment, more jobs, it was too expensive to do those sewer connections, even though the sewer district knew that it really wasn't related to volume. That was just the way they did it, and they didn't want to change it. So cities, what I find is that they tack on a bunch of fees. They don't really care if the impact of them to you or not. They say you can do it or not, and they won't, you know, they won't do anything to relieve it. That's the big concern, because they're trying to balance budgets. It's tough to get anything affordable when you're having to carry, you know, a city's ledger besides yours on that. So to me, my biggest worry is all government related in terms of either fees, ordinances, zonings. It's all the problems come from the government. Sorry about that on that. And no matter who you pick, they're all to blame. So there's no, you know, like I said, I've been around for a while. Everybody says it's the other guys, but no matter who's in charge, sometimes it's a little easier, sometimes it's not, but it never gets too easy. So that's my biggest concern: government fees, government hurdles, the time frames to approval. My LOI on that land, the LOI we're buying it from Lowe's, went out in October of 2017. It'll be closing next week on the land. Then we'll start building. So it'll be over 4 years before, hey, let's do this till someone can occupy. And we have tenants in tow. So it would probably be 5+ years. So that gives you an idea of what can be troublesome, is the government, you know, making it just a challenge to get stuff done.
And how big of an impact has that had? Are you seeing more developers and even users who can't find space here going to other locations, other states right now?
Yeah, I get that. it's almost like a joke. You know, I have people all the time saying, hey, they're getting out of there. I know, I definitely know companies that are moving out of there. I just had another company that is moving out of the Inner Bay area. They're leaving Alameda, and they cited that the wages, they're wanting to lease temporary space for me out in Antioch while they're moving to Nevada. So they said, hey, we're just going to do a 1-year deal here. We're blowing out of Alameda. It's too expensive. And they had like 40 or 50 jobs supposedly, and they're moving to Reno because it's the Reno area is a lot cheaper. And in the meantime, they're going to just lease a small little space here for a year. So that's, you know, that was last week. You know, a company blowing out of Alameda with decent employment and decent company. So yeah, they're trying to get it where it's cheaper, you know, and again, it's just a matter of business, right? If you can make money there at those expenses, great. You can stay. If you can't, you can't. Yeah, it's real simple. It's math, right? Like a CCIM. You know, it's either, hey, it's too expensive to do business here and we're out. And a lot of people are doing it. And I get a lot of investors that want to exchange out of the area too, which can be frustrating because they don't want to buy anything again in California. And I have a couple of owners that are trying to head out of town too. Eric, I want you to sell this. I'm going to use this. I'm getting out of California.
Yeah, I think most of us are experiencing that same story. And like you said, you think at some point the regulators would start to see this, but with these unbelievable deficits that are coming up, it probably, I mean, do you foresee any relief in sight?
No, I mean, it's they have no interest in trimming their budget or adjusting their fees. I can tell you there's no interest whatsoever in adjusting their fees. They're going to be adding to the fees. What I think is going to be hilarious is I think if they pass the split roll on commercial property and everybody votes to give it to the landlords on the property, the property taxes. And that's where I laugh, and I say, hey, you got a triple net lease? Well, landlord don't pay for it. Hey, you got a regular gross lease that lets you pass on increases in property taxes? Most do. So it ain't gonna be the landlord that's paying for it. And that's the worst part about it, is that you've got the media and the press and so for politicians trying to say, hey, we're gonna screw that landlord. We're gonna give him that, we're gonna make sure he pays property taxes. I said, you better read your lease, man. Your lease is, you're paying for it. And what will be hilarious is when the landlords, if it does pass, and they do get the increase, when they hand that bill over to the tenant, and the tenant's going to go, what's this? And the landlord's going to go, what's your increased property tax bill? You voted for it, remember? You should have read your lease. And that's going to be the shocker, because almost everybody's lease, whether it's triple net or regular one, has a provision to pass it on. And even more importantly, who has the triple net leases? The very sophisticated landlord. So that real rich guy that they thought they were going to go after to start with, he's not going to see a penny of that increase. It's just going to go right on to the tenant. And that's the sad thing, is that you got government people think that they're going to be giving it to the landlord, when anyone in commercial real estate knows that those big guys, they all got triple net leases. Hey, raise the property tax, whatever you want. Here you go, tenant. That's called a pass-through, right?
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike Angelos, he made a comment in the chat box, and then tenants will pass on their increased costs to their customers through higher prices. So essentially, the voters would be taxing themselves.
It's great. It's the best way that the politicians do it. They have you thinking you're going to be giving it to the landlord. Anybody knows the landlord's not going to be paying that. It's going to be the tenant in one of two ways. It's going to be directly passed through. Here's your new bill. And only one who is not going to get it, it's those little tiny unsophisticated landlords. So the mom and pops who thought it'd be a great idea to do the 1 or 2 page lease because we're simple and it's just our little investment. They're the ones that get hosed when the Blackstone's going, hey, do whatever you want. It's triple net lease. So that's even worse, is because the one people that they thought, they thought they were going to give it to the big landlords. Who they gave it to is to your mom and dad who had the low investment property, or something like that. But again, it's the government. They won't deal, and just my humble opinion is always, they won't deal with the tough decisions. And they just, for them, they can't make tough decisions on stuff of like, hey, here's where you got to cut your costs or so forth, or you got to deal with pension reform. Well, we can't touch that. Okay, well, then what do we do? Well, we keep the fees where they're at. Well, then it stalls everything. Yeah, I know.
Well, Eric, sometimes we speak offline and we email back and forth. I guess if you were going to give advice to other people on the call right now, it's like these regulations, they get proposed, or the bills get proposed. I mean, what can we do to help stop it? It's like, I know you're pretty involved, but I feel like a lot of people may not really know what to do or how to even go about it.
I would say the number one thing is in this country, people forget that one of our biggest thing is we can tell the elected officials what we think and what they should do. So I regularly let the county supervisors, the mayors, everybody know whether they want to know or not what Eric Rehn's humble opinion is on stuff. And sometimes I'll get them thanking me, and other times I'll get them where they can't stand it. But if you're a good enough broker and you do a lot of deals, they have to listen to you because they know you're doing things in the area. So sometimes when they get the call, I let them know up front whether it's going to be a beating or I'm going to give them a good carrot today, because there's things that they have to do. And if they don't, interesting, our government, it's not necessarily a scientific business. They respond to the squeaky wheel. People making the most noise, that's who they listen to. Oh, God, that's a problem because I hear it. So it's important for you to contact them, email, pick up the phone, and let them know. They may not agree with you. I have it where half of them disagree. And then I get a phone call from one saying, you're absolutely right. What we're doing is illegal. And they all have different opinions. But I think it's important that you get out and you educate them, because I am constantly trying to educate all my elected officials. In fact, I just gave one an update last week who was running for office, and they had a meeting. They go, this would be great because I can use it in my talk. I got the inside scoop. So you can actually help them by telling them little, like, hey, here's my deal in North Congress. It's finally closed and we're going to be bringing this many jobs. That person had an inside info onto something, but then again, then they have to listen to me call up and complain about stuff too, saying, hey, you need to do this, that, or the other thing. And they get constantly hearing me about fees. Okay, it starts to sink in after a while, but pick up the phone, call them, email them, let them know you're a resource, because even if it's not the complaining, someday you're going to be there and you're going to want their help. And that's the different side. It's like, hey, I've been giving you guys info and so forth. You know who I am on that. But yeah, you got to be active down there and show up and take a speaker card and talk about something and point something out. It will make a difference later on. It's shocking. I never thought I would get there, but it made such a huge difference knowing elected people that you got a cell phone number to one of the council members.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, so CCIM Institute, we, the Institute level, they've been monitoring the proposition that's being proposed here in California. So as an example, this morning, 3 hours ago, we got an email from the Institute saying that they have invited Rex Heim with the California Business Property Association and offered to present a webinar regarding this split roll tax proposition. And basically we'll be showing to all of our CCIM members in California how to take action on this issue. It's going to be on September 17th at 9 a.m., which is a Thursday. So watch out for your email, because we're going to be sending out these email invitation for you guys to be involved.
You want to make a statement on that? You cut out the little section of your lease that shows on the triple net where the property taxes are billed to the lessee, And you also cut that out on the gross lease of how any increases. And you just send it to your elected officials and say, hey, I appreciate you going after the landlord. Try reading the lease. Read these provisions. Tell me who you think is going to be paying for that increase. And you just pass that information on everybody and let them know, hey, that's fine. You can vote for it. Just make sure you understand who's paying for it. Because that's what people vote for stuff. They don't realize who's paying for it. Or as I tell the tenant when they come through on the tour, all the TI work you see here, that's part the landlord pays for it. Anything else, that's why you're paying for it, because that's why we waited for you to show up for your money, because otherwise we would have done it. So again, be vocal. You'd be surprised. It's going to help you out later too when you need help, and you'll get referrals. And it could be just simple enough, providing those guys with info. How many of your elected officials do you think know that every lease has provision for passing through increases of property tax and property insurance to the tenant? None of them do. They think they're going to get it to the landlord. You start to educate them, they'll be going, well, wait a minute. And it's like, yeah, you better wait a minute, because what you're doing is not doing what it's doing. You just taxed everybody else. So, why not raise all the property taxes? Because this way you definitely just gave it to the tenants on that one. So, but yeah, it's, again, as you know, Helen, I'm after you to get more involved in government, because it's something that, we need good people in there and you have to tell them what they need to do.
I'm trying to do my part, definitely.
And let's end up, we have time for one more question. Cameron actually has a comment that's pertinent. He said, plus cities and counties will be selling properties soon, so they will need us to get the best price as well. So that's a good point. You want to get in front of city officials. And Kyle has one last question. Eric, do you see more long-term lease deals, such as 10 to 15 years, or more short-term lease deals with COVID?
Well, that's going to depend on your product type. The logistic guys, I think they're going bigger ones because, those are new product, and it's just, they're bigger companies, and that's what they're doing. Everybody else, they're trying to keep them shorter for, I just see tenants wanting to keep it shorter. I signed a little 3-year one and so forth, but on the smaller ones, usually everybody's trying to keep a shorter lease right now because they don't know what the heck's going on, for one, on that. So bigger deals, TI, definitely longer term. The smaller deals, shorter terms. And on the smaller deals, I've got guys not wanting to do TI work, meaning that, hey, we don't want to do anything where we're going to be spending money on this. It's going to be, hey, try and take it as is. On that. Yeah, and again, anecdotally, I've seen a decent increase in activity lately in the last couple months. And my humble opinion is that once that vaccine comes out, this thing is going to take off, at least in the industrial side. I've got guys just revved up and ready to go, and they are just wanting to get back to work, and it goes at every level. It may, hey, there may be some more remote or whatever, but everywhere I'm at, the companies I'm dealing with, they're just like sitting there revved up at the light, and they're going, are you kidding me? We're ready to go. So I'm fairly optimistic that when the vaccine hits, as quickly as they can get it out by the beginning of next year, it's going to be roaring to try and catch up. Because again, we got stuff that needs to get built in industrial. And by building stuff, that creates more jobs, more activity.
Great. Well, hey, thank you so much, Eric. We really do appreciate, all your time and expertise and sharing all this knowledge with us. It's really been great.
No worries. You're absolutely welcome. I think if people don't always like that industrial product segment, but now you see why it's such a good one, because why everybody else is in the toilet. Industrial's good, and if you are looking at a market segment, be more than happy to talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. Also, Kennedy Wilson, we've actually been hiring brokers over here, hiring retail brokers, quite a few, industrial, office. So we're actually hiring right now. So we got a pretty optimistic view of what's going to go on here.
I want to remind everybody, you know, it's like commercial real estate, there are so many different sectors. And if you are not familiar with industrial, for sure to partner up with somebody or refer the business to an industrial experts like Eric. We have a lot of different experts in our chapter where you can reach out and refer business to. So I just want to remind everyone, if you're not familiar with a specific product, be sure to use somebody who is specialized in that. With that said,
Hey, can I jump in one last thing? Speaking of referrals, thank you very much. I just signed the listing on that one. It was a 6 medical office buildings on the listing. Took it away from Cushman Wakefield. Thank you for that. And we get a chance, I have to tell you how I did it. It was the simplest marketing thing to do it. I'll share it with everybody. The other brokers hadn't posted their pricing anywhere. And this landlord had actually priced their building, or their pricing was the lowest in the market. And they weren't letting people know it. So my big strategic marketing plan, we'll put the price on the flyer. That actually won the list.
That's it. So, I mean,
my strategic plan is we'll just post the price. That was my marketing plan that won me the listing. But thank you very much. That's CCIMs and referrals. That was a 6-building medical office complex that he says, after we lease up to 7 spots, I'll want you to sell it for me.
Wow. This is, you know, this is so powerful.
And you didn't even ask for a referral on that. That's even the best part about it.
I have to tell you guys that being involved with the chapter, not only like making a difference in industry, we always talk about like helping yourself as well. You know, this is the platform where you get to express your expertise and then show your expertise to other people. We get referrals left and right on the back end. So I truly, truly encourage everybody to be involved, you know, to be seen, and we are giving you this platform. So I hope that we can see more of you. And before we go, I just want to invite all those who are going to be on our 2021 leadership team to continue to stay on, because we are going to have our board of directors meeting. But I'll let Shane to close out, but thank you so much.
Yeah, and for some of you who are asking in the chat box, we put on the screen Eric's contact info. So if you have any further questions or have any potential deals you'd like to do with Eric, or if you're looking for a new home as a broker, please contact Eric. His contact info is on the screen. And again, thank you all for attending. All of you, our viewership, you're our lifeblood. We really appreciate you coming on every month to our virtual meetings to hear great speakers like Eric. So thank you all so much. And thanks again, Eric.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care.